Hello and welcome to a Warcraft story. I am your host and bard and storyteller, TheWriter. Now this story holds a special place in my heart from back when I used to play World of Warcraft, and as most good World of Warcraft stories do, it comes from the Burning Crusade era. That is, when World of Warcraft had only one expansion, and everybody was talking about, Black Citadel and Illidan and things like that. Everybody was running around in Outlands. Now, I hailed from a PvP RP server. That is a server where if you weren't in a city, you were flagged for PvP and somebody could jump you at any time. And at the same time, there were role players running around, having, fishing parties and talking and pretending to be their characters in the streets of the cities. But, the braver ones would go out into the world where it wasn't safe to conduct their events. And I was on Alliance at the time. I was I believe a Draenei Paladin. And I was, getting up through the level 40 range, like 45, 47, somewhere in there. And word got out about a horde guild that all they did was run around and gank people, and this is not unusual for a PvP server, but more importantly they would gank people that were doing RP events. If they saw people standing around talking or not in their PvP gear, out in a field somewhere or sitting and fishing or doing anything that wasn't game oriented, if they didn't look ready, they would run in and just kill them before they had a chance to react. And yes, that is a way to play, and, LOL, cry more, but they got so well-renowned, well-known by the Alliance side, that eventually something had to be done about this. Now, there is a chat channel on all PvP servers called World Defense. So if somebody from the opposing faction, whether it be Alliance or Horde, starts running around killing NPCs or enacting combat in a friendly zone, then World Defense will say, such and such town is under attack, or, such and such region is under attack. It wouldn't trigger everywhere because there's PvP going on all the time on a PvP server, but if, a member of the Horde ran into the middle of town and started slaughtering quest givers and vendors and things like that, then yes, the World Defense channel would go off and tell everybody, where this was happening. This guild, I don't remember what it was called. It had a really overblown, silly kind of name. Not even like a For the Horde kind of game. No Quarter. That's what it was. It was a guild called No Quarter, where that was all they did. They ran around, they tried to find people out in the world and just kill them. And then when they ran back from the graveyard, kill them again. And, kill all the NPCs around them. If they were in a town and they spotted a person, they were never really seen by themselves. There were always 4 or 5 of them running around in a group. And the guild was actually quite large, 90, 100, 110 people. So having a squad of 5 was probably no problem for them. But it got to the point where it became increasingly annoyed, and the Alliance started to take notice, as a whole on the server. The Alliance began to take notice of No Quarter. So, as with a regular PvP server, red means dead. When you see somebody of the opposing faction who's flagged for PvP, their name is red, so you know that they're an enemy, so red means dead became the catchphrase. And when No Quarter was involved, it began to just kind of be a witch hunt, because they were quite powerful. I'm not gonna lie, taking on somebody from No Quarter was never an easy task, because I think the prerequisite for joining No Quarter was that you had to have a full set of PvP gear. Now, whether that be arena gear or regular battleground gear or what have you, you had to be top level, you had to be outfitted, in other words, and you had to do that on your own Steam. And I believe later on, you had to have at least 10,000 PvP kills on that character whether that be in Battlegrounds or World v World, or on the regular, out in the regular world, out in the wilds or whatever. You had to have at least 10,000 kills, which is nothing to sneeze at on one character, because I actually, there was an alliance equivalent for a short time that quickly fell apart, and I looked at my character that I had been playing with for, 10 months, 12 months or whatever, and I had just over 2,000. Of course, I wasn't really big into PvP, so, getting the battleground armor just so I could be safe when I was out running around in the wilds, wasn't a pleasant experience when you're level 40, level 45, or whatever it happened to be. I did a lot of alt hopping back then, but I digress. So No Quarter was kind of bullying the Alliance for a long time, and it started to piss a lot of people off. So some of the bigger guilds got together and decided, you know what, we need to do something about No Quarter. And they basically decided that we need to, whenever we spot somebody from No Quarter, we have to just go and give them shit until this guild falls apart. And since they usually ran around in troops of 4 or 5, it took several people to kill each person, since they were outfitted in PvP gear. Because even though it's a PvP server, it doesn't necessarily mean you're out there PvPing, because you could be there for the roleplay, you could be there leveling your character and have no chance at all. You could be a raider on a PvP server, but they decided, you know what, sheer numbers will speak if we devote to this. So a bunch of the guild leaders got together, most of them role-playing guilds, raiding guilds, different things like that, and we basically had a circle of leaders, very, names that people knew, respected guild leaders, lieutenants. There was a great gathering. I'm sorry I didn't take any screenshots of it at the time. This was this was during the Burning Crusade, so this was quite some time ago. And there was a great gathering of the minds to figure out how they were going to coordinate this. And they said, okay, to do this, we are going to have to strike an accord or make a contract or do something to hold all the guilds that want to fight No Quarter until they're not No Quarter anymore. We have to make each other responsible to each other. If one of us calls for help, all the others have to come if they're online, or if they're level 70 or whatever. Yeah, 70. If they're level 70, they have to come. It's like Hell's Angels. If somebody dies and you're within 100 miles of them, you have to come and help bury the casket. Basically, this is going to be the golden rule, and here's how we're going to set it down. And I was a nobody. I was a level 45, 47 Draenei Paladin, and I'm sitting there, not saying anything, because I was just a peon at the time. And when you're in a roleplay server and you're trying to work your way up through the ranks, it can be kind of hard. You have to follow orders, you have to stand on ceremony, you have to, make a nice town gown, that kind of thing. A town gown is when this was before transmogrification, when you could make your armor look like anything. You would make a second set of armor to go to role-playing events in, and they called it a town gown, whether you were a man or a woman. And so I'm sitting there in my I don't remember what I was wearing, but in my town gown, sitting on ceremony, not saying anything. And the leader of my guild was a dwarven blacksmith called Drumlee, or just Drumlee. And he decided, what we should do is have a symbolic exchange of items. And these items will represent the strength of this promise that we are making each other. And each guild, there were 7 guilds. This was quite a big deal. That's how big of a shit No Quarter was being. 7 guilds got together to do something, and they said, okay, we will each craft or bring forth an item, not something we buy off the auction house, because that's kind of dumb. We will each bring forth an item, either by our own craft or dropped in a raid or somewhere difficult, to represent the strength of our promise to take on no quarter, and these items will be given to, one of the guilds. Should Guild A bring this item, it will be given to Guild B, and Guild B's item will be given to Guild C, and so on and so forth, to show how interconnected and strong we are. And, gear does talk, so, going off to find rare and unusual items to combat no quarter was probably a good idea to begin with. And Drumleek, he's a dwarf, and he kind of strokes his beard and he goes, well, I run an RP guild, basically. We are many in number, but not high in strength. So we cannot go into Black Temple and bring out tons of fat loot to share with everybody. So what we will do is we will go and obtain a difficult-to-obtain item from somewhere in the old world. Something that is hard to come across, something that is difficult to obtain, just to show that we're willing to put forth the effort. And then Drumlee, after this meeting is over, Drumlee goes, Tony, and I spelled my name in the female way since it was a female Draenei Paladin. And he goes, Tony, I'm gonna need you on this one. And I go, what? And he goes, I already have an idea for, Guild B over there. Their leader is a rogue, so we're going to make something called a Phantom Blade. And in order to make a Phantom Blade, we're going to need quite a few hard-to-get materials. Things that you could normally buy on the auction house, but not so much in the bulk that we need. So, I'm going to send you out on a mission to have this Phantom Blade created. And he shows me the plans to how this magic sword is made. And he goes, I want to send you to the faraway region of Teneris. And I'm already kind of groaning, because Teneris is a desert, and there's almost nothing there, other than a goblin town and the Caverns of Time. And the Caverns of Time are like a level 60 area, so I can't go in there. So he's sending me to the middle of nowhere to find some rare items so he can make this magic sword. And I'm like... And I'm trying not to give him shit, because, in character, he's my boss. So I have to gracefully agree and do as he says. And he goes, all right, I know you don't want to do this for nothing, so what I'm going to do is offer you 2 rank promotions. And at the time, rank meant guild bank access. It meant, getting a better spot at the guild meetings, etc., etc. So that was actually something that was worth it. He goes, I will give you 2 guild rank promotions if you will go out there. And, he basically gave me a grocery list. I need 7 of this, and, 48 of this, and 2 of these, and X, Y, and Z. And almost all these materials can be found in Teneris. So that's why I'm going to send you there. So you only have to make 1 trip. And, again, don't jump onto the auction house, because that's not in the spirit of things. And since you're level 45, that's actually an appropriate zone for you to be gaining XP and not just wasting your time. So I'm like, okay, Drumlee. And, Drumlee sends me out to Gadgetzan, which is a goblin town. And the goblins were a neutral faction back then. They hadn't yet joined the Alliance. So he sends me out to Goblin Town with one of the lieutenants. And one of the lieutenants says, the desert is going to be harsh, and blah-de-blah-de-blah. And he gives me this, he gives me like a stack of health potions, and he gives me this set of robes. And he goes, wear these while you're out there, and that'll protect you from the sun. And here is, this, I think he gave me like a blue set of boots or something. And blue in World of Warcraft, when the text is blue, is a relatively rare item. So he gave me some really nice boots and some really inappropriate like mage gear, even though I was a paladin. And he goes, wear this and wear anything else you find in the desert. So I'm like, all right, if we're really gonna do it this way. So I basically have to leave my armor behind and walk into the desert wearing like bed sheets and stuff like that. So my character goes off to one side, and she basically just kind of strips in front of the lieutenant, who has no problem watching her do this because he's got a thing for Draenei. And she puts on these robes, and she puts this cowl on, and it's like white with red trim. I look like a white mage from Final Fantasy. It was probably one of the early mage sets. And she puts on these heavy paladin boots, and I've just got my sword and my shield, or I've got like my two-handed sword. I think I went two-handed. It's not Fury. I forget what the DPS paladin is called, but because I haven't played WoW in a long time. So I go out with my two-handed sword and these really thin bedsheet robes and this nice pair of boots, and I'm like, okay, so I've got this grocery list like sitting next to my monitor, and I go out there, and I was like, okay, I need, and I look at it and I go, what is a phantom blade? And I look at like the stats and the abilities of this sword. And a phantom blade, it turns out, is an anti-rogue sword, or it's also called a twink sword, more powerful than a normal sword of its level. And it is an anti-rogue sword because if its ability goes off when you strike someone, that person can't turn invisible or stealth. So in WoW, when rogues or cat druids or whatever are invisible, they're very difficult to kill. So as soon as one comes out, you whack him with the phantom blade, and he can't turn invisible for a while. That's long enough to kill him, because rogues have they have teleport, they have ways of turning invisible multiple times in order to kill you with massive like double crits and crap like that. So, tapping a rogue with the Phantom Blade is basically signing his death warrant. And that is going to be our gift to, Guild B, to fight no quarter. Now, the Phantom Blade was only level 45, so it's not going to kill anyone, but it's more than enough. Most, 80% of people that go ganking and bullying other people are either rogues or cat druids, because they can turn invisible and jump you. So I'm there with my grocery list. I was like, okay, it's an anti-rogue sword meant to fight no quarter. I was like, alright, fine. This is 2 guild promotions. Whatever. So I go out into the desert with the winds howling around me, and I leave the lieutenant in Gadgetzan, and he goes on. And Drumley, who is still online, can see that I'm in Daenerys, and if I were to leave in 5 minutes, then he knows that I'm going to the auction house to just buy these materials. And not that I had the money to do so, because the materials were outrageous. It was like 45 bars of mithril, and 2 potions of invisibility, some leather, some true silver, and like 6 or 7 breaths of wind. And I look at the breaths of wind and I was like, breaths of wind, really? And because WoW is set into elements, earth, wind, fire, water, dark, light, and there's a couple others, nature, I knew that breath of wind meant I was going to be fighting air elementals. And being out in the middle of the desert, there's going to be no cover from said air elementals, because they're going to be blowing sand everywhere. And they basically look like tornadoes with like arms and angry eyeballs. And they're kind of goofy looking, but so does most of WoW look goofy. So I go out there with my two-handed sword and my, not gear that I'm wearing, and I start fighting air elementals. And yes, I'm just out there farming, but, this is for a good cause and worth a couple of guild promotions, then yeah, fine. So I turn on like a podcast or something. I don't remember what I was doing. And I farmed so many air elementals, I ended up with a new set of gear. Because breaths of wind, apparently, have like a 10% drop rate. And you can guess how many air elementals it took to freaking get 6 of them, much less, stay alive in my freaking mage gear on my paladin. I ended up getting some plate pants, some gauntlets, a helmet. I walked out of Daenerys with a whole new set of armor. None of it was particularly good, but, it was plate mail rather than cloth. So by the time I got back to Gadgetzan with to kind of take a break, I had my 6 breaths of wind, which I guess they're just like bottled, like air elemental essence or whatever you want to call that. You know, I was sporting completely new duds, and they all kind of matched because they came from the same mob type. So, yeah, I kind of imagine my character coming out of the desert with like brand new armor, with like the dinky mage outfit they'd given her, like wrapped around her head or something to keep the sun off. And she was a miner, so I could just run around the edges of Teneris and through the hills to find all the mithril and the true silver, etc., etc. Obviously, I wasn't going to find any potions of invisibility out in the desert, nor any leather, but I could find 80% of the materials needed to have this phantom blade made. And so I go, once I have gathered, my god, so much mithril, and true silver as well. True silver is basically a rare metal in WoW. It's the text is green, you know, it has a chance to spawn in certain places where there's normally mithril. So it's like, if there's not mithril there, then it might be true silver. So it was very, very tedious to find. I was there most of the day, to be honest. But, hey, my roleplay, my story, whatever. And I come out of the desert with all these materials, and I'm like, Drumley, I've got all these materials. What should I do with them? And he goes, report to Ironforge. And we all go to Ironforge, which is the dwarven city. And there's a big anvil with like an ironworks in the middle of this place, because dwarves. And I give all the materials to Drumley, and I give the lieutenant, or I roleplay, giving the lieutenant back the gear that he had given me, and scold him for peeking while I was undressing and all that fun stuff, because I was playing a female character, but whatever. And I get into my regular gear again, my town gown, or whatever you want to call it. And by then, Drumley is banging away on the anvil, and he has, you know, he brought the leather and had the potions made by other people, and he's got the phantom blade. And it's a cool looking sword. I gotta give it that. It's not, again, it's like a level 45 weapon. It's not very powerful, but it's like a glass crystalline, like flamey shaped, like lightning struck sand kind of shape, and it's very cool looking. And it does share its model with a few other, I think like 9 other swords in WoW, but at the time, the Phantom Blade, I think that was one of the only ones that looked like that, and it looked wicked cool. Just that blue, glowy, crystalline stuff. And I see Drumley pass the sword off to our guild enchantress. And the enchantress puts the ice enchant on it, which means, you know, occasionally it will hit somebody and do frost damage and slow them down for a short period of time. So we have an anti-rogue sword that will keep somebody from stealthing and turning invisible, that will also hit them with ice damage and slow them down. So basically it's a rogue slayer sword, or a cat druid slayer sword. Anything that relies on turning invisible will be visible and much, much slower when it's struck. And we go, okay, you know, and I get my guild promotion. I'm put up from, like, not peon first class, but I was just below lieutenant. I got greater bank vault access, or guild vault access. I got more permissions because I had gone out and done this quest for my guild. And so, you know, a week later, when everybody's schedules were open again, these guilds meet up again, and they go, okay, you know, we found, you know, the helmet of blah-de-blah from these mountains, and they pass it to these people, and I go, you know, we found the cape of this, and, you know, we found the staff of Jordan. The staff of Jordan was very impressive, because that item's fucking impossible to find. And, you know, we've brought, you know, the the Phantom Blade with the ice enchantment on it. And we pass it over to, you know, Guild B. And Guild B's guild leader immediately equips it, and he loves it. So, you know, did good on us, on our reputation for bringing something cool to this Accord meeting. And they hammer it out, and they do. They say, you know, No Quarter, this guild, has become such a problem that from now on, those of you that are, you know, level 70, regardless of gear, regardless of whatever the hell, if you see World Defense go off and people confirm that it is No Quarter, it is now your job to chase them down if you are anywhere near them. And since everybody's out in Outlands, you know, the world is only so big. So it eventually became this campaign, and not so much that all these people were going to be an equal challenge to the members of No Quarter who specialized in PvP, but the sheer number of people that would go out of their way to give them shit, to give them trouble, to wait for them to attack something strong and then just go stab them in the back, eventually proved the point. And it took maybe a month before reports of like guild drama and stuff started to kind of filter over to the Alliance side, where, you know, people that were in No Quarter, you know, we would kill them and then, you know, camp them for, you know, picking on helpless people and bullying around the old world where people are like level 30, level 40. We would kill them and then camp them, and then, you know, they would log off of their characters and log on to Alliance alts to like yell at us and ask and just like scream obscenities and, you know, oh, you're camping, you're such a noob faggot, and, you know, all these little things like, well, don't pick on the newbies, fucking assholes. And of course, you know, word of this Accord, of this alliance within the Alliance, gets over to No Quarter's attention, and they figure out, you know, it's this guild and it's this guild and it's this guild. They all stand against us. And, you know, like I said, within a month or so, No Quarter is eventually disbanded. So, you know, the quest, you know, it took a bunch of guilds, but, you know, after, you know, Red is Dead was the thing to start things with No Quarter, but once enough people got pissed off, because that was just what No Quarter did. They wanted to become famous for that. Well, they did, and then they got crushed for it. So, mission accomplished, I guess. When you make a guild that sets out, like, I knew some people Alliance side who would just hang out, excuse me, in like Stranglethorn Jungle, and they would just backstab people that were running along the road and then just like dance on their corpses. That's fine. That's a PvP server for you. You know, you have to be wary, you have to be on the watch. You know, if you see a level 70 hanging out in a level 25 zone, he's not there for any good reason, trust me. But No Quarter set out to be a bunch of assholes, and they got creamed for it. And then, you know, their members were easily identifiable because, you know, they had the red tabards with, not the Horde symbol, but another of the big symbols. I think it was one of the suits of cards symbols. And they had the tags above their heads that said, you know, so-and-so of No Quarter. So as soon as you saw somebody from No Quarter, you know, people would immediately go and attack them because they were the most hated guild on the server. And, you know, eventually that caused a lot of frustration on their end. Well, yeah, you made a few too many enemies. So people went to go get their mains and or would report to the World Defense channel and say, hey, No Quarter, you know, this person and this person and this person spotted at this location. And people would fly in from all over the place to give No Quarter a piece of their mind and a piece of their steel. So you made your bed, now sleep in it. I guess that's about where that story ends. The quest for the Phantom Blade was my portion of that story, but it did eventually aid in the destruction of No Quarter. I seriously doubt anybody went into battle with that particular sword unless he like went over and like tagged a rogue or a druid or whatever and then like jumped back, because once you enter battle in WoW, once you enter battle with a weapon drawn and you hit somebody, then you can't change your weapon out, which is actually something that Guild Wars is good at, is changing weapons on the fly. But I don't think it got used for anything more than ceremony, but that was the point of strengthening the Accord, was a ceremonial exchange of rare items. So that certainly happened, and that was an excellent chapter in my experience with World of Warcraft, was the quest for the Phantom Blade. So hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!